Hey kids, Johnny Torch here again, bringing you another Torch review, brought to you by the Adventures of Bullets Bourbon Comics. It's been a while since I've picked up any of DC's DTV movies. I tend to enjoy them more often than not, so I figured now's as good a time as any to check a couple out. The first one on my to-do list was Son of Batman. Having not read many comics regularly in recent years, I often joke I can't afford to create comics and buy them at the same time. I've heard tell that Batman has a son now named Damian, and that he, at least for a time, became Robin, his new sidekick. I found this idea intriguing despite my contention that there are more than enough Robins in the Batman universe. Spoilers to follow. As it turns out, Damian is the son of Talia, daughter of Batman's legendary opponent Ra's al Ghul. She's kept him secret from the Dark Knight whilst training him to become Ra's eventual successor. The ever-popular Deathstroke is the villain who, after leading an attack on Ra's fortress, kills Ra's and causes Talia and Damian to head to Gotham to seek help from the Dark Knight. Deathstroke's plan involves Kirk Langstrom, aka Man-Bat, whom he uses to create his mutagen formula to create an army of Man-Bats. Langstrom has no choice but to obey, as Deathstroke has his wife Francine and daughter Rebecca held hostage. In a somewhat disappointing move, Kirk, the original Man-Bat himself, never transforms. Rebecca is given a pretty strange punk makeover for a 10-year-old. What kind of parents let a kid do that, anyway? Speaking of odd parenting, where were we? Ah yes, Talia takes Damian to meet his pop. Bats takes him in while Talia decides to go off to attend to League business. Basically what follows is Damian running amok looking for revenge against Deathstroke while Bats tries to steady him on a more noble course. Along the way, Alfred cracks a few good jokes and Nightwing shows up to remind us what a good Robin looks like. Damian gets a little envious and eventually Batman lets him take up the Robin mantle as they go after Deathstroke. With the general summary out of the way, I'll say this wasn't a bad film by any means, just fairly bland. Damian as a character never really comes off as very interesting. Maybe that's unfair since he probably had more time for development in the comics, but he comes off as expected here. A bratty, hot-tempered 9-year-old. Although they never really specify his age, I'm simply speculating. Batman tries to mold him somewhat, but as far as personalities go, that's like the bland leading the bland. The biggest problem I had is the relationships between the characters, or basically the lack thereof. The whole Ra's legacy aspect of the comics is a thing of legend. Ra's wants Batman as his successor. He thinks he's the only man worthy of his empire and his daughter Talia. Talia wants Batman too, and unfortunately for both of them, Batman wants no part of it. It's very fitting that we learn that Talia resorted to drugging the Caped Crusader in order to have her way with him. However, it's still very unsettling that Batman is taken advantage of in this way. The film doesn't make a big deal over it, but had the roles been reversed and the victim a female hero, I'm sure it would have made for some irate viewers. Here, Talia is regarded more as being briefly unethical, if anything. Ra's dies early on and is promptly forgotten by Talia, which seemed very out of character. So we don't really get the sense of how he feels about the method of his grandson and heir apparent's arrival into the world. Doesn't he still want Batman involved in his plans, or is just having Damian take over sufficient? We don't really get the sense Damian knows or cares who Batman is either. Batman seems not overly attached to the boy, getting no more and perhaps less involved with him than his other protégés. Damian hints at feelings of rivalry with Nightwing, but it's not really examined. Nightwing basically regards Damian as the hyperactive pest that he is. Talia flies off for the bulk of the film, succeeding only in getting captured to set up the last act battle. There would have been more interesting things to have done with her had she actually had some kind of role in the movie. Seeing her and Batman's different parenting skills should have been amusing. But ultimately, the film doesn't care about complex relationships. You come to a Batman story for action, right? The film has some decent action scenes, most involving Damian, but nothing you probably haven't seen before. Killer Croc is also involved as a minor villain whom Batman deals with. He's on some of the mutagen which results in him growing a tail that Batman eventually rips off in a fairly gruesome manner. In most of the DC DTV films I've seen, they are somewhat mild, with what seems like a token curse word, line of dialogue, and somewhat excessively bloody violence to justify their PG-13 rating. This one does seem to go overboard in most respects. For example, Deathstroke stabs Damian through both arms to a wall, which he promptly frees himself from by pulling his arms through the blade hilts. Now that's rough going in my book to begin with, but when it happens to a 9-year-old, ugh. The voice acting is fairly unmemorable. Stuart Allen, who plays Damian, was pretty good. Jason O'Mara is one of the most bland Batman voice actors. Granted, Kevin Conroy is king, but at least give Bruce Greenwood a call next time you want to change things up. Monica Baccarin does a great job with Talia. She's no stranger to the Batman world as she's playing Dr. Leslie Tompkins on Gotham. The animation is quite good. They didn't overdo the character designs either, which is a plus. Talia doesn't look too unlike her Batman the Animated Series counterpart, for example. At the end of the day, it's an amusing romp that looks good, has some decent action, but doesn't really satisfy on the characters and their relationships. I get that they didn't want to make this a soap opera, but I need to care about these characters. And actually, I need to see them interact in meaningful ways for me to do so. They gave us a glimpse here and there of what this film ultimately should have been had they tapped the potential. I give Son of Batman 3.5 stars out of 5. Remember to go to my website, Bullets Bourbon Comics, to check out the latest issue of The Adventures of Bullets Bourbon, Private Eye. This is Johnny Torch once again reminding you, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again very soon.